we've gone to two different kinds of things. And for those of you, you've all been in business for a long time, and probably if we added this up, we'd have generations worth of experience here in this stage, just by putting all this together. And which I'm glad for, because we need some perspective here, because the two issues. One is that the old days of understanding political conversation and discourse in terms of media as we had traditionally captured it has changed dramatically. And so I'm struck by how quickly we got into discussion about social media and other things, with media understood not as just broadcast and print, but in a whole variety of other things. And a second piece of this is the degree to which that media is itself unmediated. That one of the roles that the media as an institution traditionally had performed was to somehow not so much filter, but to try to at least distill truth out of the conversations that are happening. And what I'm hearing from you is the two things are happening simultaneously that are leading to polarization. One is that there's a lot more stuff, a lot more places where people are getting information, and that information is for the most part unmediated, so that people tend to plug into what it is that reinforces their beliefs and dismiss the stuff that doesn't, without anybody checking to see whether or not it's true. And so how is this both changing your business and changing in your mind what it is that is going on as we're trying to make sense out of all this stuff? Hard question, who wants to take a crack at that first? Steve?
So in some respects, it has completely transformed our business. In other ways, it hasn't touched it. So when Mother Jones started in 1976, it was a print magazine. It came out, I think, originally 10 times a year, then it went to 8, now it's at 6. And
we're going the other direction.
Yeah, good luck. That's keep it up. And we had it came out of a moment of the environmental movement and anti-imperialist stuff and the women's movement, LGBT campaigns, really informed by that cultural and generational moment, and carried forward on that strength. It had 300,000 subscribers within a couple of years. It won a National Magazine Award in its second year of existence, and was on the road for many years. This thing called Mosaic was invented in 1991 or 92, whatever. We did the Mojo Wire in 1993. It's like, wow, this is cool. We get to take all this stuff from our magazine and put it on the web. Isn't that great? Nobody read it. And it wasn't actually until, and this is the pivot point, it wasn't actually until 2005 where we hit a juncture, and this is where it's changed. The juncture was, well, we could either throw a big party and really celebrate 30-odd years of kick-ass journalism and then carry on. Or we take a huge jump, a huge leap off the cliff with a little bit of fundraising and reinvent ourselves as a digital-first operation, which we did, which took 8 or 9 years, including a great recession, to work. And so now our audience is still has a terrific magazine. There's a couple 100,000 people that plunk down their subscription revenue every year. And there's an audience online, half of which comes from social media, of 14 million people a month. So our ability to use and plug into this digital space was both the driver and the outcome. So that's a total transformation in workflow, work process, qualifications for journalists, interactions with audience, modes of fundraising, you name it. The thing that didn't change was the necessity to protect the quality of the journalism, to curate it properly. That's, I think, what we do now is try to provide context and curation, as well as what does today's news mean to us as we report on it, and to provide our readers with what we believe to be fact-checked and accurate reporting of the day. So that hasn't changed.
Linda?
Can I build on that rosy glow
Sure.
you started? I have to say, because I'm old enough to say it, I never thought in my lifetime I would ever see a news war like we saw during the Watergate era between the Washington Post and the New York Times. We got one now. And it's because people are willing to pay for high-quality news. Both of those organizations, along with Vanity Fair and others who do in-depth reporting like you guys, are seeing their readership rising. And it's because of this phenomenon. There is a need for news, and people are willing to pay for it. And we all thought that wasn't going to happen a couple of years ago. We thought the whole thing was going off a cliff. But now we've got a healthy news environment, not for everybody. It's still challenging. Everybody has to diversify their revenue sources to make it. But honestly, you're seeing quality content. And I think it's too easy to romanticize the past. I remember the days of monolithic news sources and trusted news sources, and guess what that got us? Vietnam. And you know, that did terrible damage in terms of life, cost, our standing in the world. So I think what we're seeing now, you know, the sky's not necessarily falling. I'll stop now.
That's a piece of good news, Nick.
I thought when you said, "Can I build on that?" you were gonna bury it. So is that my job now?
Yeah,
If you want to, go ahead. We'll give you a shovel.
No, I don't want to. I mean, I think yes. It's you are right. We just are in the middle of probably the greatest newspaper war that. Well, I was going to say we'll ever see, but who knows what's coming.
Just for everybody who may not be insiders, can you explain the war, what it's about, who the combatants are?
Yeah, I'm just talking about the New York Times and the Washington Post, which are like the two big newspapers that are making it for two different reasons. One, because they recognized the value of subscription revenue before anybody else did and really doubled down on it. And I think the New York Times gets 60 or 70% of its revenue from readers now, as opposed to advertisers. And I'm being generous with that because part of that 60 or 70% is the 2 million people who don't read the newspaper but really want to do that crossword puzzle every day, or are into the cooking app. So it's,
It's a good app.
The newspaper is doing really well, but it's not all news. And the other is the Washington Post, which is mostly doing well because it's got a major investment from Jeff Bezos, who obviously owns Amazon and some weird rocket companies. They're just competing in a war for scoops and stories, and they are both doing better than ever. But I think that so too are 100 fake news sources. And while the New York Times has, 2 million paying subscribers, that is, 1 out of every 150 people you're going to encounter, and most people you meet in a day do not pay for the New York Times. But many of them do use Facebook or listen to their crazy uncle and are getting news from a million other sources as well. So part of the transition that Mother Jones and everybody else had to make to be digital first, and I think, Don, this gets back to your original question, is that you've really atomized the product and you can slap the Mother Jones label on top of something and hopefully that stands for something.
Whether you like it or not.
Right, whether you like it or not, but so too can Forbes. We can think of like the Daily Stormer and these wild alt-right products as being fake news, but I would put places like BuzzFeed and the Huffington Post and Forbes in that category a little bit as well. They wouldn't want to answer to that, but they have built giant contributor networks with thousands of people who are not vetted or go through the same process, but do still benefit from the name being slapped across the top. So now you're just competing on like a story by story, piece by piece, post by post, tweet by tweet. You're competing with everything. And I think, Don, what was really interesting about the way you phrased your original question here is I think you kind of switched between using news and media as though they were the same thing. And that's part of the issue here. It's like my competition is not what Steve's team is doing up here in San Francisco. My competition is also like Candy Crush. It's just we're competing for attention. Like we're in the game against everybody else. So not only do I need to find the resources, let's get back to like who pays for this stuff and whether it informs our work. Not only do I need to find the resources to do the work right, which costs more than anybody wants to accept it for costing. Like the New York Times is not going to get by, no matter how expensive your subscription is, without finding alternate revenue streams.
And they just founded a nonprofit, too, the Times.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's the news this morning, right? We can talk about Trump. But the news this morning is the New York Times just moved Janet Elder, who's been with the Times for 35 years, into a new position to start a team to go after grant and foundation and nonprofit money, and they're going to take everything that
They're going to take
we
all our
rely
money.
on. Yeah.